and gentlemen, John Humphrey.
Okay, hello everyone. I don't know if you heard George Hoover giving me the Johnny Carson Show introduction, but I want to thank you for making this meeting tonight. And, one of the notes that I want to present before we get started is about the SMPTE ATC, the Advanced Tech Conference that's coming up Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, November 9, 10, 11, and then the next Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 16, 17, 18. SMPTE asked me to mention that. Unlike the NAB, many of those presentations are pay to play these days. And in the case of SMPTE, they're all peer reviewed and very valuable. I looked over the listing today. This is some good stuff. So because it's virtual, you don't have to go out to California. So that's kind of a nice thing. And there's, discussions of changes in acquisition and AI and cloud services. So anyway, if you have a chance, please go and register for this. It's I think it's about $150, and there's a 10% discount going on right now for the ATC. I'd like to also remind you to join SMPTE and the Pittsburgh Section. There's a lot of things that SMPTE offers, and I won't go into them right now, but I think you probably know. Because these meetings are virtual, it makes it a lot easier for us to have top presenters. And although Dan happens to be in Pittsburgh, we're really lucky to have him presenting tonight. It seems like COVID cases are on the decline. I'm optimistic at some time in the future we'll be able to have real meetings and somebody will buy you dinner. And, I really look forward to that. It was a great thing that we've missed a lot over the last, year and a half? Something like that. And NAB plans to do the show in the spring, and I hope that before that we'll be able to do some live events with the SMPTE section, and we have some people lined up who have some great presentations that really require you to be there and don't work on a virtual presentation. I also wanted to plug the next month, the development of 24p video, and Glenn Prisborski will talk about his development of 24p and his patent on 24p progressive. Glenn shot film forever and figured out that, maybe it'd be a lot easier if we just shot video in 24p like film. This month, I'm really looking forward to this. My background is in mobile, and we're really thrilled to have Dan Turk, who is a vice president and chief engineer of NEP, one of the largest mobile companies in the world. And they have been pioneering a lot of new technology, and his presentation, New Trends in Remote Production, is all about that. So without further ado, Dan, you can unmute your mic and take it from here.
Nice to see everybody again. As we said, I wish it was in person like we used to, but it soon will be coming back. I'm going to share the screen here. PowerPoint. It's not going to work today.
Dan, if you don't mind, I'll jump in while you're getting that going and just mention, I want to thank the managers of the SMPTE section. I do that every month, and I missed it this time. Greg Abel, who is now working for NEP. Bill Bennett, who's in Michigan right now. Dan is a manager, Ed Fraticelli, Mike Giannatis, George Hoover, and of course, John Luff. So I'm padding here. You know, it's the old stretch. And so have I stretched enough, Dan?
I think so. I found
Oh.
the, I guess I don't use Zoom enough.
Yeah, it's kind of basic stuff for you.
Hold on one sec. I'm gonna come back in.
Okay. Yeah, I know you can get lost in the desktops and stuff like that. Oh, and while I have the floor, so to speak, the next meeting is December 1st. That's Glenn Prisborski and the development of 24P video.
Why did it show it as locked? All right, sorry, I'm back here. I tried to come back in. All right, well, I have a PowerPoint. It is showing locked for some reason and will not share. Why it's doing that today, I have
If
no idea.
anybody has any ideas, you can jump in. And I've had that problem too, Dan.
Well, here we go. There we go.
Now, Dan has done all kinds of science projects with 3D and ST2110 in the mobile trucks. So here's another science project. There you go. And Dan, it looks like your mic is muted. You're probably cursing, and that's why.
Hey, is that better?
There you go.
There we
Okay, I'm
go.
getting out of here,
You
buddy.
see the PowerPoint slide now?
Yeah, I see the presentation, right? Remote workflow options.
Correct. So
we're also seeing your preview page, Dan.
Oh yeah.
So we're seeing the next slide that says COVID restrictions in the upper right-hand corner.
How about that one? There we go.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm out of here, Dan. It's all yours.
So one of the things that I think has brought the remote workflow forward in the US much faster than I think any of us thought it would come is obviously COVID. It was a blessing and a curse, I think, because a lot of times as we're thinking about how the last year went, a lot of people said, yes, I did it, but do I really want to do it that way? And it was workflows that got pushed out and how can we do this better in 2 weeks with what we have because of people not going to work and not being able to get things, being able to buy new and kind of use the latest technology wasn't always an option. So a lot of terms that people came up with, REMI kind of stuff was around even before COVID. Everyone realized connectivity was king. There's centralized production, people wanting to work from home, REMCO, REMI Pro. Everyone became friends with AWS. VPNs became very important. And kind of the next kind of genre of that and where it hopefully goes is more of a cloud production or centralized production model where we can all do better shows with more people that don't necessarily have to waste half the time traveling from site to site, where the A-level production team could do 3 games in a weekend from a studio like you see here that is connected to the venue but feels like you're on site. A lot of the technology and things that we put into it is how do you make it feel like, not feel like you're far away from site, feel like you're there. The environment is a big important part of it, but also little things like video conferencing and snoop cameras and things like that. So when you're sitting in your spot, you don't feel like you're across the country. You feel like you're actually on site and part of it. So a lot of this has come through COVID, obviously. Come on now. COVID restrictions brought new workflows. I've never bought so many VPN appliances in my life than we did in that probably 6-month time. Video encoding, traditionally NEP in the US didn't do much encoding. That was really on the broadcasters. We provided video to the end and they dealt with how they're getting it back to their broadcast center. So our experience wasn't as much. So we dove right in and are dealing with it. How do we get it not only to a broadcaster, but to people's houses? What are the goods and bads and what are the risk factors? Arvon being an important piece of how you make people feel like they're there. They want to touch their panel and be able to hit it and talk versus it being a conference and feeling like you're on camera. And how do you, that was a big part of everything we did was how do you make it so it's seamless? It's as close as you can get without being there, but being from home. We built 30 something home kits. Dante was an important piece also with the audio world of how do you build a home kit that you can take to their house and make it be, kind of idiot proof, or there's only, I don't want to plug in 4 wires to make this work. We need 1 wire. And can it be PoE so it's all 1 wire seamless? They can't mess it up. Some people are more, technical than others, and some, would get into kits and help, and others, it has to just work plugged in and it has to be connect the red wire to the red connector to the back on the red port. There's dumb things like we put blank connectors on the back of the extra BNCs or Ethernet connectors. So there's literally 1 place you can plug this wire in. So, the experience was a big part of how we do it and how we did it well. And with that, we built mini kits. Here's a picture in the office. These are all going for Turner basketball and playoffs. There were 12 people in Atlanta that we basically took 4 conference rooms and built out production monitor walls and remoted these people from the truck to Atlanta so they didn't have to travel. And it's director, producer, AD, graphics, 3 EVS operators, LD, and 1 video person is kind of what we did for every show. For the DNC, which obviously was all last summer, we had the director for the show in his house, LD, PA, and edit were all off-site. For People's Court, this was actually a pretty fun one because it was a new challenge of, we had the studio in New York, we have the judge who lives in Florida, and then you have people all over the country. So how can we do this? How can we make this, this was not, what's the best we can do it, is how do we get them back on the air? Which is a whole nother, because at the time, the studio in New York, the judge from Florida couldn't travel. So one of the things with that is you're on public internet. You're on VPN tunnels, and you have to, when we go into these projects, it's a lot of times it's, lay out the expectations and lay out what you're trying to do, but it becomes a risk factor analysis also, because as we did the judge, Judy, or the judge from her house for June, July, and August, and it was great. The first week of September, it was horrible. And you start to think of, this is a judge in her house in Florida in a neighborhood. What started the first week of September? Schools. Every kid is Zooming, every kid is online, and it would, so, the neighborhood basically ended up finding out from the provider, of course, there was only 1 that was in the neighborhood, is the node for that neighborhood was actually getting saturated, so you're dropping packets. And when you're trying to do video, that's a big deal. So with everything, you really have to look at it and look at the risk, look at your budget, look at what you want to do. Do you want to do a dedicated, connected path via something like an AT&T or a Lumen where you're paying by the hour, or are you okay with VPN tunnels over the internet? With this, I think, definitely here, everyone on the call, as you've seen things and done things, and I'd like to make this as much of a conversation as we can. So please feel free to raise your hand, type in the chat, type in anything, and let's hear what you have done. And maybe we'll take some time to do that after this. But with that, we've kind of looked at our business and are saying, rolling 120 trucks all over the country doing productions 7 days a week is a great business. We like it. Is it what it's going to be in 10 years? I don't think so. So how do we start investing in this now? How do we start making a path for it so that we are the leaders and out there, and as customers and clients are willing to take the jump, we're there, we have some experience, and it really is a transition, and it's a huge transition because of technology and everything that can change. Because as we're doing this, we're also switching to 1080p, because no one's going to invest in new stuff that's not 1080p. So let's go ahead and do that at the same time, which is more bandwidth. But honestly, when you're I to P, a lot of encoders and things can deal with the P easier and better and with less bandwidth than an interlace signal. So we kind of came up with, obviously, there's the traditional workflows. Everyone is on site, everyone, full crew there. There's 2 trucks, and this is kind of built around the baseball model of right now. I don't know if many of you know this, but in a baseball world, there are home shows, away shows, and national shows. Some games, there are 3 full production crews there. So the idea of this is a great business. It's very safe. Everything is on site. You're just sending away the 4 or 5 transmission paths, which go to your broadcast center. It's the way we've been doing it for 100 years, the way we all like it. But that's not the way that it has to be. And let's use technology and look at how do we take it to the next step. So they have one that is called the, I kind of started hearing the REMCO. It was kind of a new term a year ago or so. Then it's really more, it's a REMI, but it's more about remote control. So let's leave all the hardware on site. Let's leave the switcher, the EVS, the graphics, everything on site, and just control it from a broadcast center. This way you can save the expensive travel of the front bench. You can use local crews. You can, have some of the same people, take advantage of the not having to lose people for travel days every time you do a show. So there's definitely, that's a good middle ground of traditional, but with remote control. People can feel a little bit more familiar with the way it is. You still have anyone on site, you still have the facility on site. So you can ease into it. And then the REMI model, where it is, more of a remote production, where you have the capture unit on site, where you're going to have a smaller footprint on site, very little operator space, and all of your operator space really is back at a broadcast center. Cameras and microphone feeds, video, A2 announcers, that can be on site or home. And this is an option we're offering for many operators. And ESPN does hundreds of shows like this now. Traditionally right now, because of the business, it's more of a traditional broadcast truck there, and it's remoted to Bristol. And then the new model of, okay, let's completely shake it up and let's think about how can we do this different? How do we as an industry, how can NEP save broadcasters money by being able to do the show for less? How can we use equipment more efficiently? How can we use people more efficiently? How do we use today's connected world to make it so that this is a new model, and it's end of the day, it can be better for all. So from site, it's similar where, audio, video, you still have, and some groups choose to have talent on site because they like to actually be able to go and talk to coaches before and after and gather information and do that. Some say they can all do it from remote. That's really more of a broadcaster's choice. One of the cool things of this with technology is we could do, any of the 3 of these or a combination based on really the broadcaster's wants, desires, how much they want to push it. Do you want to play a little safe and kind of ease more into it? Or do you want to say, you know what, we're jumping in, we're doing this, and let's go full centralized production, where in the centralized production world, we're building a hub in the central US where a lot of the equipment will sit. So from site, it truly is just audio and video bringing back. All the processing, the switchers, graphics, replays, all of that is done in the data center. And then the operators can be anywhere. So obviously it's all about connectivity at that point, because with latency and when you're trying to do frame accurate things, just with replays and things like that, it really can't be on VPN public internet. There are tools and systems that we built using Amazon Cloud and other things like that that are on the public to get things as quick and best you can. The problem with that is some days it is perfect, you have no issues, and some days there's a node somewhere in your path that can, is overloaded and you really have no control. So there are ways around it, the ways to make it better, but there's no way to really make it perfect. So if you want it perfect and you want to have full redundancy, it really has to be an EPL from one of the connectivity partners like a Lumen and AT&T, something like that, so that you can get a guaranteed redundant 10 gig type link to site. So this is a model that we're going full-fledged, we're building out. We are, kind of at a industry time where we're taking a chance. We're building this actively now. We've hired a lot of people to help with this, and we're looking at this as a way of the future, and we want to be part of the future. And you know what, if you want to do a truck, we like trucks. We will build them all the time, but if you have if you want to take the step, we're gonna take the step ahead of you and try to take the best. One of the things with our group is, and you look at the entire world, different regions and different groups have done things differently based on the economics, where people are, even connectivity of, how many venues you have, that kind of thing. We're able we've built a technology group inside the company that we're able to, we're building it in the US now, but it's not our first time. We're using information and the success of what Australia did, what Netherlands is doing, and what all we've done all over the world to let's not make any mistakes and do things twice. Let's do it once. Let's, do it right, make it be a great experience. Because that's kind of what somewhat you start to saw some of the people kind of back off of this, because the COVID solutions were not thrown together, but they were, it needs to work in a few months, and all the businesses were also within COVID rules. So things were a little bit harder and availability of products was less. So it became, how do we get this done? And we all got it done. We all got it working. Was it perfect? No. Would you do it the same way again? No. We've all learned a lot. So how do we do it? How do we make it so that it is the same feeling as if you were sitting in the truck or you're sitting in a connected facility in LA or Atlanta or Miami or New York? We took a studio in New York and our building in Ruffner, which is outside of LA, and have built two in each production control rooms that will be connected to our data center, and are working on getting all this connected and up and running and available to clients here probably March or April of this year. So that was kind of the slides and the pieces that we've really done for that. And we actually had a kind of industry call with a lot of the baseball, because baseball is an interesting sport because of there's a lot of games, there's a lot of productions, traditional model, there's 2 trucks at every single venue. And how the RSN model of TV is, as the TV rights and TV viewers have kind of gone down, so has it for the RSNs and that kind of stuff. So they're in a model of how do we do this and save money? So last year, the away feeds just took a world feed, and in their studio, they added graphics and overlaid talent. And I think all the CFOs loved that. All the production people hated it. And it's, how do we not spend what we were when we were doing everything on site, but be able to do a hybrid type model where we can save some money, but still add to the production value and still have our home show feel, and have cameras that follow what the talent is talking about and tell the story the best they can, versus trying to tell a story over a game. And it's not, the cameras aren't necessarily, because you have no control of them, because it's just a world feed. So we're completely along the journey, and I don't think there's any one answer that is exactly what any customer is going to do, but it becomes a, what do you want to do? What are your goals? And let's come up with a solution. You know, those are kind of the popular models there. Different networks are doing differently. And you also have the adventure of, call it new broadcasters like a Prime Video or a Apple or things like that that are coming into this world with sports, and but don't have a broadcast center in the background, don't have all of the, you know, people set up for even you know, doing all the study and insertion and all of that stuff. So we end up dealing with that from site, which is a fun challenge, something different. Any questions? I think it's nice to kind of open up to the group and see what you guys have done. Anyone have, you know, anything they've done like this?
Dan, there is a question on the Q&A panel if you have that open. You may have been looking for it on the chat.
I was on the other one, you're right. Okay. Are there rules of thumbs amount of bandwidth you'll need for production of this type, i.e. 4 cameras, 10 megabits, minimum 50? The interesting part is it becomes, what are you willing to do and what is your quality choices? So there are, you know, if you're doing the just from home, so it's multi-viewers and that kind of things, you can do things like the HEVC, you know, H.264, 265, that you're in a 8 to 10 megabits for a, and honestly, the funny part is if you look at, especially when you're trying to be an operator, this is one of the tests we did for an EVS, is you got to read the time code and the audio and all the little character stuff on the screen and what looks good, what doesn't. And it's, if you can get it all in 1080p, you actually can take it down lower than in 1080i based on a lot of the encoders. We looked at a lot of different encoders. We do a lot of the high vision ones have been great. They're kind of the simple, easy just encoder that is small and easy to, you know, put in packages. But so that's one model. Then the other model is I want the lossless JPEG XS, J2K, that type of. So that is a JPEG XS goes to 10:1 lossless supposedly, but depends on the product you pick. But so that, but even if you think of a 3 gig signal, 10:1, you're still 300 megs per video. So, you know, from site, we're looking at about a 7 to 9 gigs for a 15 camera type of show. Obviously, and if we're laying fiber and ordering things, you know, we're looking at the 50 and 100 gig wavelength. So that's it's a big number, which gets expensive and is harder, but it all goes back into how are you going to do this and what's your budget and what is your risk factor? You know what, you can do it over VPN and HEVC and do it on a normal 300 by 40 meg Comcast internet. And some days it'll be great. Some days it won't. And unfortunately, there's not much you can do to fix that. Tweeter. So at the NEP hub, are those control rooms intended for production teams to travel to where the hub is to do the show? So that's some of the kind of, when we go back to the different regions, different worlds have different models. Australia is kind of really where we started the bigger shows doing this first. And one of the things that really made sense for Australia is when you looked at the crew list, 90% of the crew lived in Sydney or Melbourne. So we honestly did a facility in both, and you can go to either. The US, that's a much harder thing. A lot of the front bench you can get between New York and LA, but a lot of the rest of it, it's harder. So that's part of the pieces that we're all kind of figuring out as an industry is, where do you do it? I mean, ideally, part of the money saving is not traveling. So you would not want to travel people to the hub, but until there is a place where people natively live, that's probably going to be a reality for maybe it's your lead tape guy and some of your people, but not everyone. So obviously you want to use as many locals as possible. Sean Ryan, said, I had a small event that we saved bandwidth by stitching 4 1080p images into a 4K for the distribution and then unstitching on the back end. Is this one of the current recommended trends for remote production? We have not been doing that. Not necessarily a reason for not doing that, but I mean, a lot of times we will send it, if you don't need it full screen, we'll send it in a multi-viewer. So now you're getting a quad split monitor type, 2 sites. So you're sending 4, 6, or 8 video down one. So in a sense, it's kind of the same thing, but we just weren't using 4K. Any other questions? I mean, that's really, our world has changed. And the amount of trucks and shows and budgets are lower and things like that. I mean, that's some of the interesting part, I think, of COVID with, I think we all talk about even NAB and IBC and those shows of how much of that actually comes back. How much of that are people going to pay for again after not paying for it? What do you guys think? Any
Dan, there's a question from Gil Hanna from the Switch. And also, could we see you, take down your slide and see you? And if you or others would like, we can go to Q&A using microphones. It's up to the others.
Yeah. Sorry, there we go. Now you can see me. So Gil Hanna from the Switch, we've been heavily involved in remote production for several years with our network enabling very high quality, low latency video feeds. We have dual diverse 10 gigs into every major league venue in the US. We're building out a 100 gig carrier pipe with links between cities and our Dallas Fort Worth, I assume, and DA11. We're upgrading port counts in NFL, NBA venues currently, and we're doing MLB, NHL next. We also have a cloud production system available for lower tier. We're also co-located with you in DC, and that is true. That the Switch is definitely one of the major players in connectivity. I think they've actually made a great business out of dealing with the telcos, so no one else has to deal with the telcos, which is a sad statement, but that's where it is in the US, and they've made a great business out of it and are definitely one of the partners and people we're dealing with. I mean, we're doing a job for the PGA, and the Switch is the connectivity partner for that. I think we will all be working together more and more as this really, when you start getting into these remote productions and models, it becomes connectivity is what it's about. Connectivity will make a venue work. It'll make a production room work. That is really becomes key in all of this working. It's one of the future of NAB as we know it. Yeah, I agree with that. Does anyone have any experience from your companies or what you guys are thinking with that? Is anybody going to IBC? How about that question? I think I am going because of some other corporate meetings that we're doing about the same time with our friends in the Netherlands. But other than that, it's really been an interesting year of a lot of change, a lot of how can we do this differently. People have been embracing the change more than ever. And it's really been a great time to figure this out, get it done, kind of work through some of the test times and get it done, get it on air. I mean, one of the things that we did that was, never had enough time, but got it done and had a great was the Turner MLB or NBA playoffs, which is a lot of cities and a lot of trucks, and not just one truck promoted, but 5 trucks that had to connect to different rooms and different production teams. And you go to look at it, and it was definitely a accomplishment that Turner did with us, and it definitely was working together more than ever because part of the goal was using their facility in Atlanta. So we turned 5 conference rooms into production facilities. and they were remoted to the truck.
Dan, I know that you've had some science projects with your ST2110 mobile trucks and like the 3D trucks that you built. John Schilberg has a question about ST2110 and has that helped or hurt?
Yeah, so has ST21 infrastructure made the pandemic and these remote facilities easier to deal with in terms of setup and operations? Unfortunately, it really hasn't, because there's only a certain number of trucks that are 2110. So like in the Turner MBA world, one of the 5 trucks was 2110, not all of them. So I think once we really get to a kind of everyone is 2110, you know, interesting part of a lot of this is you're not doing it native 2110 because the bandwidth isn't there. I mean, to do these native 2110s, you're going to need the 100 gig links Gil was talking about that are still kind of coming. I mean, I've had conversations with a lot of the carriers, and you know, when you just have the, hey, pipe dream, what do you want? And you say, well, let's start with 100 gig, and they're like, what? Everywhere, all these places? You know, it's harder than you think to get in the US. So 2110 hasn't really helped or hurt this, because you still had to go to some sort of encoding to get it into the pipe we had. So you couldn't natively connect, you know, PTP to PTP and just do flows back and forth. You were going to some device to turn that into J2K, JPEG-XS, whether it's one of Gil's at the switch, one of their boxes, or some sort of throwdown box. You can see when all this is 2110, I think it will. And as technology is growing and the 2110, a lot of the gateways and products like that are becoming big FPGA engines. And today they're a gateway. Tomorrow, with the right license and config, could be a JPEG-XS encoder, could be a J2K encoder. That I think is also, that technology shift is definitely changing and helping it in those. But unfortunately, there's not enough of them out there to where it really, we kind of had to have a plan as if it wasn't, because a lot of them weren't.
I think you're looking at Sean Ryan's question, one that I like. Which is easier? Take a video
Open
guy
question.
and teach him
Oh,
IT, or IT guy teach
easier to
him
teach,
video?
yeah, broadcast AV guys to understand IT, or is it teach IT guys to understand our world? That is one of the things we're doing as a company is we've had, I mean, George and guys started this, and I was one of the first, I think, an apprenticeship program that is getting kind of new blood into the industry. And one of the things that we've found is when you really get into a 2110 new world, you have to be able to understand CLI and, you know, where things are going. And it's something that is hard to teach, because it's all, you know, it's not go to a menu and figure it out and you can do it once a year and kind of remember it. It's one of those, if you don't use it, you lose it type of topics. So, you know, what we've been doing is trying to hire the IT computer savvy, whether it's some sort of, you know, a kid that does coding that, you know, kind of thinks like that, of that mentality, and pairing them with a broadcast person who understands the importance of what they're doing. And you can't just do it. Let's find out what we're doing. This is a NFL game on the air that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to a lot of people. And, you know, kind of bringing the best of two worlds together, because, you know, the broadcast guys pick it up and the IT guys pick up the broadcast. It's almost at a time where it's a little bit easier to take the IT guy and teach him broadcast than it is the other way around, because it's a different kind of mindset. You know, the IT guy is not going to know resistor color code and find the right resistor and fix the circuit and build a circuit. But you know what? They will build a application that will push names between the roller device and a tally system. So it's a different mindset, a different skill set. So you really need the combination to really come up with what we are looking for in the trucks. There's a lot of questions here. Sorry, it doesn't scroll down automatically. So looks like Tweeter is next. Do you think a time will come when qualified crew types such as EVS graphics, audio, video persons end up equipping a home control area and freelancing from home. I think at a certain level, yes, and it may be that kind of like in a broadcast now, they would only travel a lead, EVS or two, and they may, instead of traveling 3, they may do 1 local. I think you'll start to see that. The hard part of the from home is connectivity, and you truly don't know, and you have no guarantee. So Gil just needs to get guaranteed redundant bandwidth into everyone's home, and we'll be good.
That last mile is always a killer, isn't it?
It is, and the hard part is it can be fine, you know, and it's almost like the power situation in stadiums and things like that. If it's fine all the setup days, all the way up to it, but you know what? When they turn on 700 heat lamps, it dips. And how far is it going to dip? And that's when you see the issues.
Dan, you still have to roll a truck because the cameras, the microphones, they all have to be on site.
Yeah, we're kind of calling that a capture vehicle, where it's a smaller, you know, it's not going to, it's the engine on site that you want to have some, you know, A2 type, let's hear it, make sure it sounds good, some kind of troubleshooting tools on that also, so that you can, you know that it's good before it goes into the network. So when you're trying to troubleshoot, so you still have to get all the stuff to site. You know, you have to, all the cameras and tripods and cable. I mean, one of the reasons we traditionally don't do video from remote is somebody still has to hook up all the wires and set the cameras up and deal with the IO at the stadium and do that. Just because you can do it from home doesn't mean you should, because a lot of people carry, you know, have multiple hats. You know, if you only sat down to video, that's all you did. Sure, you do that from home, but who's going to take, you know, plug the fibers into the side of the truck, and who's going to figure out, you know, when there's a problem, who's going to deal with that? Who's going to set up the cameras? Who's going to set up the booth and get all the video feeds for, you know, that the stadium requires, or, you know, the NFL requires feeds that go into their boxes, and the NBA requires feeds and all that kind of stuff. So people still have to be on site to do a lot of that. So you're still going to have a presence, and you're still going to have people on site, but it doesn't need to be the 50 or 60 people like it is on some of these. And you're still going to have that first mile from a stadium to somewhere. And that's kind of where we've looked at, you know, where in the US with connectivity, you know, your connectivity costs can double if you're in the wrong area and the backbone's not there. And, you know, so you got to look at what makes sense and where is it and place it accordingly. So that's kind of why we've taken the data center approach in the US, where in Netherlands and in Australia, the data center is kind of attached to a production facility, where in the US, it just did not make sense with connectivity. And also, you know, the price per square foot of data center or real estate in those places. All right, Gil, place can start would be parts of a larger production like MLB dugout cams and things like that. I mean, definitely one of, I kind of call it the, you know, you may not see the NFL, but you may see the pregame show. You may not, you know, some of the shoulder programming. We're actually doing a show for Prime Video that is the Thursday night football, but it's all of the alternative programming of it that they're doing. So there's 4 shows that they do with different talent, kind of looking at things differently. You know, so we get cameras and world feed from site and bring it in and kind of create other shows that are meant to, how do you, if you bought the rights for Thursday night football for tons of money, how do you take and get the most out? How do you create, like there's one, there's with Hannah Storm and I can't remember first names up, Kramer, do kind of the NFL from a women's perspective. And there's 2 female announcers that announce the whole game and talk about different things that are, you know, different. There's talks of, you know, shows for betting and, you know, fantasy football and all that kind of stuff of how do you, with all this there and not having to be on site and be able to do this from afar, it opens up the world to, you know, be able to do it more cost effective, which means you can actually do it, where a lot of these feeds, if you have to have 50 people on site and roll all this stuff on site, it just doesn't, it's not cost effective. The business model kind of falls apart.
Yeah, I think this applies to the Peyton and Eli Manning version of NFL football.
Someone asked, you know, there ain't truth to Sinclair bankruptcy. If so, how would you see the RSN model changes? I honestly have not heard that, so I do not know anything about that. I don't know if anyone else does.
Well, they had trouble with the regional sports networks, no question, but I don't think that's
that goes back
bankruptcy
into
thing.
remote workflow and how do we do this cheaper? How do we use things more efficiently? How do we use people more efficiently? How do we make it so that the model can be done in a different, you know, as we talk about, I talked about on these meetings, you know, cord cutters and just the world is changing and how people watch TV is changing. How do you keep up with that and keep our businesses, keep everybody employed?
Dan, one of the things we talked about, it's not an official question or anything, was early career freelancers getting into mobile production. And how does all this affect them?
It's, I'll tell you, the baseball kind of model I used in the example there, it has hugely affected the industry because right now that other show is not happening. So half of those freelancers don't really have work. So that doesn't make it easy for people to get into the industry when there's kind of an excess of people currently. I mean, everyone I think is hoping that is a COVID issue, is a temporary, and we're all working. That's kind of, I mentioned, we actually had a group of kind of the mobile vendors of how do we all work together, because you get into even the baseball world and different companies had different contracts for different cities and it wasn't any one group. So how do we all work together and make it so that we can do, let's say, away feeds remote, no matter where you're at. So with that, that is where, I mean, honestly, there's going to be some opportunities for people who are willing to move. And, you know, as these data center type places are built up and production control rooms, a lot of it, you can't please everyone everywhere. So looking at where companies are building these and talking with things like that, definitely there'll be some opportunities. But, you know, it's still a great business. It's still, you know, we're, you know, could sell 5 or 6 more trucks if we had them. Everyone is back and wanting to be on site and wanting to do it. So, you know, if you're younger and in college, take advantage of, you know, maybe a smaller truck going to site. It may be a, you know, how do you become a utility for an ESPN plus college feed? You know, there's a lot of opportunities with schools working with them. So if you get into the school programs, you can get in, you know, through that, because they end up being, you know, ESPN is the client. And like a Pitt here in Pittsburgh has a big program, and they actually use their facilities for the ESPN, you know, airing of the ACC network shows. And then there's the good old, I think if you're in Pittsburgh, we're always hiring. We do have a lot of people that we find in our staffing the trucks through our apprenticeship program. So, you know, that is a varying degree of people that are in it. Some are coming from broadcast, some are a recommendation, you know, some are maybe a little more of a project that is a good person and we all feel like it has the basics and, you know, can get there through that. Sean Ryan's another one. So do you see this model becoming cost effective to the point of smaller groups like high schools, recreational leagues to get high quality local broadcasts and webinars? I think we're getting there. I mean, I think you're definitely going to be on the, you know, public internet, obviously, for that kind of stuff. I think as technology comes and automation systems and things like that will really make a lot of that, make their broadcast better, because you're probably not going to have the people to manually do it. I mean, kind of the thought you always had of, you know, especially the, call it volleyball, call it tennis, call it basketball, of, you know, could you shoot that with 4 8K cameras and have a pan zoom follow the ball technology to go back and forth? And yeah, it's not going to have the personal story, but you know what's gonna be a lot better than someone with a handy cam doing this. We have Rick. How expensive of a network are you expecting a hub to start with, depending on how much work would be likely? A lot of it is you're going to use the networks that are already there. So the Switch has an expansive network in almost every major venue. AT&T has their GVS network, they call it. Lumen has the old Vivix network. There's also a lot of if you read the announcements, and the NBA has 100 gig network to every one of theirs. So it's not just the traditional people doing it. It's also some of the the NFL, NBA, those groups doing it. And once it's in, it's easy to share. It's that getting in the first mile or last mile that make it hard. Any other questions?
Looks like it has wound down a little bit, Dan. We've got a lot of questions, though.
I've got one more here just came
okay.
up. Do you ever see TV camera operators, like cameramen who are remote from site, especially on low budget? At NEP, we actually have a group called Fletcher that, we actually operate a lot of those cameras from afar. That was kind of one of the SMPTE or one of the COVID things we did, is how do you put the remote, the POV type cameras out there? And right now there's a guy that sits in a truck and he has what looks like a camera pedestal that does it. And honestly, that's all data. So as long as you can get the data and get latency down and keep it, you can definitely get to, almost like you have the military and you have the drone pilots that no longer are in airplanes, they're all sitting in the room. Thank you, John.
Yeah, sorry, I was laughing about the drone pilots, all of the TV shows, the Bourne Identity show or whatever, there's a guy sitting in Las Vegas in a trailer flying a drone.
Be doing your super slow-mo replay too. And a lot of this is newer technology and newer things as they come up. Everyone is focused on that as an industry. I mean, one thing we didn't really touch on too much here is the whole cloud production, which definitely has its niche and definitely is something that is growing very fast. All the manufacturers from Grass Valleys to actually VizRT has a lot of stuff in it, of switchers and replay and that kind of stuff. It's at the we use it a lot for our corporate event world, where there's a lot of guys that during COVID did the Zoom call for their company. No one really liked it, didn't like the experience, still can't do a traditional bring everyone in, bring a big truck in, but how do we do a production like that, from the cloud or somewhere that has some production value and looks better than just a Zoom call, like, these kind of things do with it, a USB camera on top of your monitor. It is what it is. So, that has definitely been, we have a fairly large AWS, they have a great network built out, and how do you, use technology and use your engineering to host things in the right place and figure that out. There definitely is an art to that. It can be good, it can be bad. So, there's a lot of stuff out there as the kind of IT world and the broadcast world merge and everything just becomes data. So, it really is kind of like the question earlier of, it's getting the right people in the room. And it's at some point, I think we all look at it with, we have a great business, we like our business, we like a traditional broadcast, but with technology, there is a lot of change, there's a lot of opportunities. And when you design new systems, you can't say, I want to design this system exactly like it was in SDI, but in IP. It's what can you do different? How can you take advantage of new technology? How can you, in a sense, not use the standard everything? Is there new opportunities? Is there a new way of thinking to do it to get to the same place? And that's all just takes time to get different groups, different production groups into that kind of mindset. And I think we're all, as the last NFL contract, which was like a 10-year contract, what we're doing for them in year 1 and year 10, I assume is going to be very different. So from a business side, how do you get through that? All the equipment, the manufacturers are somewhat shrinking, not growing. There aren't more, switchers to buy or routers or camera companies. It's shrinking. So, how do you deal with that?
Dan, I think you mentioned that some of your clients or the rights holders don't want their events covered using one of your 3 options. They want it like the traditional way.
Correct. So a lot of it is the like the NFL, they really care about the production and what it does, and they don't just take the check and say go have fun. There's no rules. There's levels that are based in the contracts. An A-level game has to be this many manned cameras, it says in the contracts. It has to be on-site production, it says in the contract. So a lot of it is I think the NBAs, NFLs, those bodies who realize that the TV rights of people watching the sport is how you grow the sport. It's how you get new audience. It's how it gets to everyone. And you don't want to get, a bad production of it takes your ratings down, which affects everyone. Before NEP, I actually worked for NASCAR. And one of the things that ISC, which owns the stadiums, there's racetracks in NASCAR, a lot of them, was also owned by the France family. And when the TV deal went from like NBC to ESPN, I think it was ESPN, we all had to take a 10% budget cut because the way the sponsorship worked, they got less money for the signs around the track because it was on a cable network and not broadcast. So things like the broadcast world really affects the business of all of these guys, way more than maybe some of us think, and which is why they care about, how it's done and who gets it. It is definitely about highest bidder, but it's also, they put things in the contract, so you can't show up with a bread van and 4 cameras and say I did it. Here we go, another question here. What if you establish a preset latency and were able to advance or decline so everyone was in sync? The audience wouldn't care if they were watching a live game or it was 30 seconds of delay. No, and that definitely is part of how we do it. When you kind of get to the hub production, the hub is 0 time. What's happening live, you want to be as close to live as possible, and you always strive for that. But at the hub, that's where 0 time really is, because that's where the operators hang off. That's where everything goes out of. If you're a couple hundred milliseconds off live, it doesn't really matter. And there's some, exceptions to that with some of the gambling and betting stuff. But, there definitely is a sync is key. Sync is, what makes this experience great or bad. So keeping everything in time, and you have to, that's probably the hardest part of the entire production workflow. Any other questions?
There were some great questions.
There were, and the key takeaway, I think, that the whole industry is looking at this is a very exciting time where everything is changing, and how do we use technology to our advantage, give the best production value, the best experience for the operators, and not take things away, but embrace change and really look at it with a new set of eyes and not just do it the way we did it before.
You hate to put it in these terms, but it's sort of like the pandemic forced a lot of people to rethink what they're doing. And remote production is one of those things.
Absolutely. It made, I think the biggest piece it did is it made everyone realize that you can do this without being there, and it's not as bad as I thought it was.
Well, Dan, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. It was great. Look at my camera. Isn't that ridiculous? It's all out of focus.
You're out of focus.
Come
You're
on.
the camera guy too.
Yeah, I know. It's really embarrassing. There it goes. I'd like to thank you for your presentation. It was great. And the number of questions is an indication of that. We had 25 participants tonight. So every meeting increases in the number of people that attend. That's a good sign. It's a good sign people are having to deal with virtual presentations and all of that. And like everyone else, I'm hoping that in the near future, we'll be able to have live events again. And some of our best events were at NEP. So, we'd like to bring everybody back out there again and see all the latest.
Another one. We're also excited to get back to normal.
Yes, as are we. We certainly are. And again, Dan, thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. I really appreciate it. It's great to have a company like NEP right here in town and to have access to you and all that NEP has been doing. Thanks again.
Thank you.
I'd like to remind everyone that, December 1st is the November meeting. Yeah, I know we're slipping a month, but that's Glenn Prisborski talking about the beginnings of the transition from video, from film, because Glenn shot film, and Glenn's on this call. And so Glenn pioneered a way to create 24-frame progressive video and patented it. And everybody had to deal with Glenn one way or the other because of his 24-frame patent. But maybe just as important, a trip down memory lane that includes the long, difficult, and expensive process of shooting and editing film commercials, which is the way it was done before. So that will be very interesting. Again, it's December 1st, 6:30, and I hope to see you all there. So unless anybody has anything else, I plan to bring this meeting to a close. Any questions from anyone? Let's see. Okay, I guess that's about it. And again, I thank everyone for joining the SMPTE Pittsburgh section for this meeting, and I'll see you next time. Thanks again.